You're already blonde and green eyes.
And we're live.
No.
Yeah, we're live.
Hello, everybody. This is Bia Labate, Chief Editor at Chacruna Net. I'm here in the Drug Policy Alliance Conference, Reform 2017, in Atlanta, Georgia, USA. And I'm here with my dear friend and colleague from Mexico, US, Zara Snapp, and she works as the international coordinator of the conference. Thanks for being with us. I see you're wearing a bracelet. What is a necklace? What is that?
So this is the molecule serotonin.
Why are you carrying the molecule serotonin in your?
Well, because I think oftentimes what we're seeking, even when we use substances or not in life, is just to feel that happiness. And so, why not promote serotonin? However, someone might get it into their system.
Yeah.
A baby's laughter, friends, things like that. Dancing.
I think everybody's pretty there's a kind of happiness up in the air because it's so vibrating, and there's a feeling that we're doing something historical and something that needs to be done and something that is urgent, and there's lots of hopes for better times. So I would like to start by asking you a general idea of what are the main topics that you think are relevant in the agenda of this conference, and what do you think it's the main debates that people should know about what's happening here?
Well, I think you're right. Yeah, this is a really lively, dynamic space, and that's because it's every 2 years the largest group of reformers come together from all over the world, mostly from the United States, but we bring around 300 people from other countries that really to liven the debate, to feel like you're in a community, in a family, in a movement, and feel and give you energy to keep going for the next 2 years, because then a lot of us go back to our own countries where things are very different, and so you need to be filled with that energy. And so what we're seeing this year, which I think is a little bit different than the last two conferences, so this happens every 2 years, so in the last 4 years, in the past, we were much more focused on international issues. The United Nations General Assembly special session was coming up. There was a lot of excitement about Uruguay regulating cannabis. So there was a lot more movement on the international front. And this year, what we're seeing, at least from my take on these sessions, is a real focus on what's going on in the United States. The fear around Trump and how that's going to affect current reform movements, how that's affecting people of color, immigrant populations. So the Trump factor is scary to people. The other thing is really around racial justice, and how are we making sure that as we move into regulation, as we move into new models of looking at drug policy reform, how can they be more equitable? How can we have more inclusion? How do we ensure, I was just on a session on local drug sellers, how do we really ensure that they form part of the market if they want, but then if people don't want to, how do you deal with that? Then there's a piece around the opioid crisis. So reflected here at the conference. And then on an international level, we have an international track here at the conference, and that's where we're really seeing issues being taken up around psychedelic research, native plants, what's going on with the research around those areas. Tomorrow we're having a session on
I share your impressions on what I've seen so far. And I also know that you are in charge of the international speakers and organizing people from abroad the U.S. So can you share with us a little bit what is the work that you're doing, and what is the panorama of foreigners that are attending here, and how is that looking like?
So we have folks from more than 20 countries that we've brought through the scholarship program, and these are people from places like Zimbabwe, Liberia, Nigeria, to then Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia, Mexico, Brazil. There's a lot of Brazilians. And then also Europe and Asia. So we have folks from the Philippines, from Indonesia, from Sarajevo. So we have this broad group of people who are working in their own countries, and this gives them the opportunity to come here to exchange experiences, learn from each other, and see how the movement is kind of being deepened here in the United States. I was speaking to some Colombians this morning, and they were saying this is really about motivation. It's almost, I feel like I'm in a church where people are trying to build that excitement around the movement. about what's possible. And so we have this broad, diverse group of folks that are here through the scholarship program. We put them on panels so that they're talking about all different kinds of issues. What panel are you speaking on tomorrow?
I was speaking on colonialism, race, and psychedelics.
Exactly. So we have those. We had that panel yesterday afternoon. We have panels on racial oppression around the world and what that means for communities. So what are different regulation models for cannabis around the world, social clubs, Uruguay. So we're seeing all of these are like inputs into the debate from other countries, so that then we can really begin thinking, how does this continue to be a global movement even while we have impacts on the local level?
Yeah, you mentioned something that I, as an anthropologist, I'm particularly curious about, and also in the last 10 years I have lived in 4 countries, so Germany, Mexico, Brazil, and the US. And you mentioned something about this American thing, this American feeling. That is something that, although I consider that I'm pretty familiar with the US, and now I'm living in the US, sharing time between the US and Mexico, I feel so much like a foreigner here, like it's so American to me. But you're also American, but you're kind of American-Mexican, and you're partly raised in Mexico. Can you speak to any of this, like, subjective feelings about this American feel? And how do you feel also a foreigner, or are you familiar with that? Is that funny for you, or do you come with the Mexican eyes and you feel the spirit of the DPA? Can you talk anything about those things?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a very special space. So I was born in Mexico, but I grew up in the States, and now I've been in Mexico for the last 10 years. So I have this kind of, don't ever feel like I'm from one place. Always you feel like your identity is conflicted. I think maybe sometimes this happens to you. So when you're here, it's I would say the U.S. feel is this. It is almost like being in a church where they're preaching and trying to build up your emotions. You see a Hollywood movie and they're playing music so that you'll feel something and you'll have a reaction to that. And here it's the same thing. Like we're building up the emotion to be able to then pour it into our work. And I think that sometimes in other countries we have more protocols, so there's more of a social structure. When we open a conference in Latin America, you're having a panel with government officials who are then saying, oh, we celebrate the opening of this and we inaugurate this, and maybe they clam a hammer or something. There's this more protocol feeling, and whereas here it's just very clearly this is about building energy and unifying us as a movement. And I think obviously Ethan Nadelman, who was the executive director of DPA until earlier this year, his father's a rabbi, so he really has that kind of that capacity and that charisma.
Preaching and kind of enthusiasm. But I agree to you. Like in the opening panel, they for example they put like emotional content, and then they throw in a certain music on the background. So it's kind of funny. Like in a way, you're feeling like you're watching some kind of film, but then you're confused because you don't know if you have seen so much American movies in your life, right, on whether you're projecting from your imagination that that's a film, or whether reality here is like a film, or they like to make it look like a film. I don't know. You know what I'm talking about?
I think our work as international folks here at this conference is to bring in the issues that are important to us that sometimes aren't on the radar in the United States. And that has to do about producers, so how are producing countries, so not just talking about decriminalization, but what does it mean for producers? What does it mean for the indigenous use of substances, of plants? What does it mean to really think about including folks who are part of the trafficking? I mean, what do you do with young people who are transiting substances from one country to another, or women who are transiting substances from one country to another within this whole production chain? And so that's what we have to be bringing up, that it's decriminalization will not be enough for the countries where production and trafficking is the big issue. And so we need to be able to talk about a full regulation so that the countries where these psychoactive substances are currently being produced can really have the economic opportunity that is owed to them.
Great. So I invite you all to keep with us, and Zara is going to present something about regulation of psychoactive plants in our conference, Sacred Plants in the Americas, in February in Chapala Lake in Mexico, and I hope to see you all there. And keep on tuned with our live stream from Atlanta.